Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Darwin Centre Live here at the Natural History Museum. My name's Aoife, and I shall be your host for this event. I'd also like to welcome our viewers who are joining us now live online. Now, today we're continuing our series of events looking at the reawakening of life after spring. We're seeing how all the different animals which are now waking up now that the weather's taken a turn for the warmer, how they've coped with the cold spell we've just had. And we're talking today about ladybird spotting, and also about a new survey that's just been launched today, looking at the invasion of the alien harlequin ladybird species. So we're joined today by Dr. Helen Roy from Anglia Polytechnic University and Dr. Mike Majerushi from Cambridge University. So thank you very much for joining us here today.
Welcome.
You've all been quite busy today because, as you can see, I'm sure if anyone's been looking at the papers this morning, there's been quite a lot of coverage over this story. So we've got here front page of the Times, I think, which is fantastic. So just to start us off, could you tell us a little bit about, Helen, could you tell us a little bit about ladybirds themselves, about their biology and life cycle?
Yeah, certainly. Ladybirds are beetles. They have biting mouth parts and hard wing cases, and they go through a complete metamorphosis, which means that the immature stages, the larvae, look very, very different to the adult stages. If you'd like to see some of those, we can just go through the life cycle with some of these here. So you may be able to see, well, this is a larval stage just here. Okay, if I can find some eggs on this plate to show you. There we are. They're very characteristic, oval shaped eggs and this yellowish colour. So they have their egg stage, and then from there hatch out tiny, tiny little immature grubs, which we call larvae. And you can see one, if I can get it in the right direction, well, over in that corner. They have 4 instars, we call them, which is where they hatch out into a tiny little grub. That sheds its skin and goes into the next, what we call an instar, sheds its skin again, and so on. So it does 4 instars and grows bigger and bigger each time, eating lots of aphids, if it's an aphid feeding one, as it goes. It then goes into a pre-pupal stage where it can... I'm not doing very well at finding these for you, am I? There we go. That's a pre-pupal stage, and it attaches itself down and then curls over and will eventually become a pupal stage. Here we go. I think I've got the hang of that. You can see those on the edge of the dish, just there. You can just see it arching over. And from that pupa will emerge an adult ladybird. And I'll just put the adults back up again.
Because you don't, I mean, I've never seen anything but a mature ladybird, or at least I wouldn't have recognised it as such. Mm-hmm. Are they, I mean, do they hide away somewhere, or are they as common if you know what you're looking for?
I think once you know what you're looking for, you see them really quite frequently, don't you?
Yeah, you have to be at the right time of year. So most of the ladybirds start to breed very end of April, May, June. And so it's the end of May, June, July that you're going to find larvae. 1 or 2 will breed later in the year, but it's quite a short window that you'll find larvae commonly.
So how many species of ladybirds are there generally in the world, and also particularly in the UK?
Worldwide there's 5,200 described.
That's quite a lot of ladybirds.
Yeah, I suspect there's a lot more out there that aren't described. And in Britain we have, from the family, we have 46. But of those, some of them are very small, just black and brown, not very strongly coloured or patterned. And so most people wouldn't recognise them as a ladybird. So there are 27 that people would generally think, oh, that's a ladybird.
Yes, because we're all fairly familiar with the sort of the lovely red colours and then the little black spots on them. Why do you think ladybirds are so popular? I mean, apart from the obvious, they do munch, the gardener's best friend and all that, munching through the aphids, but...
Well, it's certainly popular for that reason, because they are good at eating aphids and control garden pests to some extent, so that makes them very popular. But I just think for children, their bright colours really are very attractive.
So in terms of surviving the winter, how do ladybirds do that?
They spend their winter in a dormant state. When the temperature starts to get cold, generally the end of September, and certainly mostly by the middle of October, the ladybirds at the adult form start to find their overwintering sites. And we can see some on this back picture here, nestling into the pine just there. And many of them will do this, aggregate together in a group to spend the winter months.
So when do they emerge, and how do they know it's time to emerge?
Well, it's temperature related. And in fact, salmon spots in that sort of situation, any warm day from about the middle of February on, they may come out, move around. Very often they'll take in a bit of water, so they'll drink dewdrops, raindrops, simply because that's one thing they lose through the winter. But if it then gets cold again that night, they go back very often to precisely the same spot. And they're waiting until when they do these little trips out, they start to find food.
Right.
Then they'll tend to disperse and find big aphid colonies, and there they're trying to then mature their ovaries, so actually make eggs. They'll mate and start the reproductive cycle. But it's largely temperature dependent.
Now, I know that there's been quite a lot of press about this recently, especially with the recent climate change conference, and it was in the news a lot that ladybirds seem to be coming out earlier and earlier, and that this could cause a problem for the ladybirds, and also it seems to be a climatic indicator. I mean, you've done some research onto this. Why do you think the ladybirds are coming out earlier?
I think they're coming out earlier. I mean, if you average it over a number of years, they're a couple of weeks earlier now than they were 20 years ago. And it's simply because it is warming up. Global warming, it's a fact. And our temperatures are getting warmer at this time of year. Because they're coming out earlier, there's a question of whether there will be food available for them when they start to come out. Now, the research that's been done, particularly at Rothamsted, on aphids suggests that they are also coming out earlier, which means that there shouldn't be a problem because the two are still going to be synchronized. But should that sort of synchronicity ever come unhinged, then there'll be a problem for one or the other.
Okay, so it would be a case of if the ladybirds came out but the aphids hadn't, they wouldn't have anything to feed on, and it would cause problems for them.
It's quite interesting on the climate change aspect that some of our British ladybirds can breed continuously. They don't need to have this winter time to mature reproductively. And for those ladybirds, if they have an extended season because of climate change, it's possible we might see more generations of ladybirds.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're sort of developing more quickly over time.
Yeah, developing more quickly and having a longer, warmer season over which they can go through their life cycles.
What kind of habitats do ladybirds like to live in ideally? I mean, because they seem to be quite widespread, there seems to be a vast number of species of them. Does that mean that they have a fairly wide range of habitats that they feel comfortable in?
It depends on the ladybird. Perhaps the most generalist would be something like the two-spot, which will occur commonly on trees and low-growing plants. Seven-spot, although we get it on trees in the winter, it only breeds on lower plants. So you won't find larvae up on lime trees where you would find, for example, two-spot larvae. Then we have some that are far more specialist. There's one called the water ladybird that's only found in marshlands. It's generally on Typha or Phragmites reeds. We get one or two, there are actually two that only live near ants. So one is a thing very similar to the seven-spot called the scarce seven-spot, and that's found with big wood ants, Formica wood ants. And I've never found one more than about 100 meters away from a wood ant's nest. There's another much smaller species called, it doesn't even have an English name, it's called Platinaspis luteorubra. And that lives with Lasius ants, various other ants. But that, it really has got all the adaptations we expect for something that lives with ants, but it still eats aphids. It's eating the aphids that the ants protect.
Because I was going to ask then, if they live near ants, does that mean they're feeding on the ants? But no, they're not. They don't. They still live exclusively on aphids.
They're feeding on the aphids. Those aphid colonies, because the ants are protecting the aphids, farming the aphids, last longer.
Right.
And these two ladybirds have worked out different types of defence to protect them from the attacks of the ants.
Right. Okay. So it's sort of almost like a symbiotic relationship.
No, I think the ants, if they could recognise these ladybirds or get around their defences, they would drive them away. Right. But in sort of the arms race, at the moment, those two species of ladybird are ahead of the ants.
Right, okay, they've got the advantage there.
Yeah.
In terms of then how specialised they are to particular habitats, how susceptible are they to habitat change? I take it that the ones that are more generalised would survive better if their habitat was to change slightly, but the more specialist ones wouldn't cope so well.
Generally, I think that's true. Most of the ladybirds, though, because they're cold-blooded, because we don't have any what you might think of as high-latitude ladybirds. We don't have any Arctic or alpine species. There are such things. We just don't have them in Britain. If things are getting warmer, I think we might expect more ladybirds. And actually some of the ones, we have quite a few that are confined to the bottom half of the British mainland. We expect those to spread up. But how things will change as other species come in from further south, that is harder to predict.
Okay. At this point, I'd just like to ask, does anyone in the audience have any questions they'd like to ask at this point? Anything? No, then I think we should go on to the launch of the new Harlequin Ladybird survey, which was launched today with much media attention. To start us off, what is the Harlequin Ladybird? It's just a different kind of ladybird then?
It is, yeah. It's a different ladybird species. It's native to Asia, but it's very, very good at eating aphids, and so has been cultured as a biological control agent and has been released in some countries such as North America and has become really widespread there. In continental Europe it's also available, and the first sighting of this Harlequin ladybird, well, the first record was in October, but there are some sightings that predate that. This is the Harlequin ladybird here, and we're launching a survey because we would like to monitor this ladybird because it threatens the species that we've been talking about that are native to the UK.
So, I mean, why exactly is it a threat? I mean, if it's it looks quite attractive and it's still sort of quite a good, sort of helpful friend to the gardener in terms of munching through aphids, how would it cause problems?
But it's partly that reason. It's so good at eating aphids that our aphid-eating species from the UK are going to suffer because it will be eating their source of food, and they will simply not be able to compete with it, is what we predict, and is what has been the case in other countries. Also, it's a little bit more generalist in what it eats, quite a bit more generalist, and it will, if aphids are in lower supply, start to feed on other ladybirds in the immature stages, or feed on the eggs, the larvae, and the pupal stages. And so therefore it can have a direct impact on those populations.
Okay, so it's actually sort of out-competing then our native ladybirds, and they're going to suffer as a consequence of that. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, how exactly are you planning on sort of monitoring this? What's the plan? How do you survey this?
We've had a website launched today which has been put together by Francis Rowland from Biological Record Centre at CEH, and we'll have online recording facilities and lots of information for people to find out more about Harlequin ladybirds, and link into a UK ladybird survey where they can find more about British ladybirds. And we just encourage everybody to report what they find and either record it online or send us in records so that we can have a look at them.
So so you're relying quite a lot then on members of the general public
Very
to sort of
so.
have a look out
Absolutely,
and contribute stuff in. How would someone sort of identify a Harlequin ladybird?
Well, firstly, the best way probably is to go onto the website, because there will be pictures of that and all the common British ladybirds. The Harlequin is a problem because it's one of its other names is the multicoloured Asian ladybird, because it's incredibly variable. You have a whole range of different forms. So you can see this one. This is a female with very bold spots. It's got 18 spots and then a 19th one right at the centre at the front on an orange background. That orange background can be from the sort of, this is a fairly yellowish one, but it can be right through to bright red. But then you can get negative ladybirds where you've got black with 2 or 4 very large, bold, yellow, orange or red spots on that black background. And the number of spots on the ones that are essentially orange can vary anything from 0 to 21.
So there's quite a lot of variation then in the...
Huge amount. And that's just in the ones we've recorded in Britain. If you go across to central Siberia, you get a whole range of other forms.
Okay. So we've got actually one of the trays from the collections here at the museum, and you can see a small sample of the variety of
and all of those are Harlequins.
So we've had a question here from Nick, who's emailed a question in. He wants to ask if members of the public are not sure about what the Harlequin ladybird looks like, can they email in a picture to you and sort of you can confirm what it is?
We'd strongly encourage people to do that. We really hope that people will email in pictures. If they don't have a digital camera or facilities for sending in a picture, they could send in the specimen so that we can verify that record and be sure that it is a Harlequin ladybird so we get an accurate picture.
And if they send specimens, they should send it to the address on the website, which is the Department of Genetics in Cambridge for the live specimens, and they should send them alive if they can. They simply put them in some little crush-proof box with nothing damp in it at all, because condensation tends to kill ladybirds. So a bit of screwed up dry paper, something like that, just to protect them from buffeting in the post. No food, and pop them in the post. Ladybirds survive incredibly well in the post, and I've had stuff arriving that got lost 6 weeks later, and the ladybirds are still fine. So just send them like that.
So quite robust little creatures then. So what are you going to do with the information when you found it? When you sort of see how widespread these Harlequin ladybirds are, how do you use that information?
Well, we're linked in the National Biodiversity Network has provided us some funding through their trust, and if anybody's been on their website you can see some quite spectacular maps, and we'll be producing maps so people will be able to see where the Harlequin ladybirds are and what their spread is. And from that we're also going to be doing a variety of science-based projects in more detail.
So, I mean,
so one of the interesting things about this is we've been very fortunate we think we found a Harlequin ladybird, identified it as such, within a couple of months of the thing arriving, certainly in under a year of it arriving. When you get new species, alien species coming in and then affecting the native fauna or flora of a place, usually it's well after it first arrived that you realise that it's there, that it's a problem, and start doing something about it. So that early monitoring is usually not done. Here, because of the American experience, where it is now registered as a pest in America, we know that it's likely to become a pest here. So as soon as it was found, we said, right. And then we were fortunate because it's a ladybird. And when we first put out mention of it, we got a lot of press coverage last October. Now, launching today, it's wonderful to be here, and, the Natural History Museum helping. And we've got, again, very good press coverage to alert people to help us in this. So I think the most important thing is we've actually got it early. And even if we can't, in the end, stop the Harlequin ladybird, we can use this study and this monitoring as a model for looking at other invasive species.
So can anything be done then if we find that this problem is going to grow? Can we do anything to halt the march of the Harlequin ladybird?
I don't believe that we can stop it as it is at the moment. It's a very dispersive species. It's going to be highly mobile. It's going to move around a lot. It produces an awful lot of eggs and seems to have quite a long season over which it can go through its life cycle. So I think it's going to reach quite high numbers. But another thing that we will be thinking about and working towards is, are there any possible control strategies so that we can protect our native species?
I do have my doubts, because the Americans are spending vast amounts of money already trying to control it there. And the sort of suggestions they're coming up with, I think, are pretty unlikely to be successful, because on the one hand they say, well, there are insecticides that kill it, but they also kill all the native species. And then one of the big problems is this thing, when it builds up to large numbers, it overwinters in people's houses in huge numbers. I mean, a house may have 100,000 of these, causing a hell of a nuisance. And the problem then is, because that's the main problem as most Americans see it, they are advising people, these ladybirds are attracted to white or pale objects, so they're advising people to paint their houses dark colours, to make them airtight, seal them up completely, to paint the walls also, or the base of the walls, with camphor, this sort of thing. And I really don't think the British public are going to be very keen on some of these control measures.
At this point, I'd like to ask, do we have any other questions from the audience? Is there anything anyone would like to know at this point, just before we finish? No? Yeah, we've just got a question over here.
I was just wondering if there's any one distinguishing feature or something to particularly look for between the native and the harlequin.
There's not one distinguishing feature. Perhaps the best feature is that if you actually look at the pronotum, and we've got one there, that one that was in there.
That one? Okay, there we go.
If you've got the pronotum there, you've got this M mark. The pronotum is that white plate with the marks in it. You've got that M mark. Now that's in dots. In slightly more spotted individuals, that becomes a proper M. Now behave yourself.
That's very typical of ladybirds.
In the black forms, you can
move on to a black form. There we go.
They're very lovely.
Now, Helen,
features.
there was a black form there underneath.
It was, but it was underneath. It wasn't so clear. I'm giving them some privacy.
But you usually do get these white marks at the side of that plate, even in the ones that haven't got the full M mark. So you're getting black right across, and you get a little bit of white right at the edge. That is a feature that most other British ladybirds don't have quite so clearly. And if you want, I can tell you exactly what's going on now, because what he is actually doing, he's trying to persuade her. He has previously made a sperm package inside her in a thing called the bursocopulatrix, and he's now trying to persuade her. It's a muscular organ, and he's trying to persuade her to do that with it, so the sperm shoots out of the sperm package up into where she keeps her sperm, which is the spermatheca.
And he will persist for quite a long time.
Yeah, he'll have another shaking bout any minute now. Come on, boy. There he goes. And that'll last about 45 minutes, an hour.
Do we have any other questions from the audience before we finish? Oh, well then, just to ask lastly, does the future look kind of bleak then for British ladybirds, or do we think we can solve this problem?
I don't think we can solve this problem. I think, well, I've even made the estimate, the prediction that the harlequin will be in all suitable habitats pretty much across the British mainland by 2008. I think we will be seeing declines in native species, appreciable declines, within 2 or 3 years. And I would think that the majority of aphid feeding British ladybirds will decline between 25-50% within 10 years. I do expect to see some extinctions.
So it's not looking too bright for the ladybirds. But with the help of people sending in information, you can record their spreads and use this data in the future to look
at the impact on the native species.
It's absolutely vital to us that people go out and record and send us all their records this summer and onwards.
Okay, well, we've got the website address just up behind us. If anyone wants to find out any more information about the Harlequin survey, if they want to contribute information to that. So I'd like to thank everyone here for joining us here. That's about all we've got time for today in Darwin Centre Live. I'd also like to thank our viewers for joining us online. And of course, thanks very much to Dr. Helen Roy and Dr. Mike Majerushi. If anyone would like to come up afterwards, I think, and have a closer look at some of the vast amounts of ladybirds we have up here, to have a closer look at the differences, then feel free. Thanks very much for joining us today, and we hope to see you again in the future. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.